Welcome, dear friends. Today, in this lecture, we are going to discuss the theory of Tridosha. Well, what is the theory of Tridosha and how to understand this, especially keeping the current advances in the biomedical sciences in view? This is what we will be discussing today. Fundamentally, Tridosha is a theoretical framework. No dosha can represent any structure or substance in the body, and that is how we need to understand the theory of Tridosha. This is essential because Ayurveda uses this theory as a template to build its different domains, maybe biology, maybe human constitution, maybe nutrition, and so on. For instance, if you take biology, in Ayurveda, each dosha has been said to be present in certain locations. For example, Vata is present in Asthi, Pitta is present in Sweda, that is sweat, Sweda, and Rakta, and Kapha is present Rasa, for instance. Similarly, specific functions have been ascribed for Vata, Pitta, and Kapha as far as biology is considered. Vata has been ascribed with the functions such as respiration. It also regulates nervous functions, nervous system functions, and so on. Kapha, for example, provides immunity. So this is how Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are related to biological controlling or regulating phenomenon and also structural phenomenon in the body. But that is not the only way how Tridosha theory is understood in Ayurveda. It is also important in determining one's constitution. Ayurveda classifies the entire population into 7 categories depending on the dominance of dosha, and this is called Prakriti. According to Ayurveda, it is called Prakriti. So there could be Vata Prakriti, Pitta Prakriti, Kapha Prakriti, Vata Pitta, Pitta Kapha, Vata Kapha, and finally Samadoshaja, that is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So that is how Ayurveda understands or rather it applies the theory of Tridosha in determining one's constitution. So again, there are some mechanisms, or there are some extrapolations which are derived out of this concept of Prakriti. For example, person with Vata Prakriti, he or she looks lean and thin. Vata Prakriti individual looks lean and thin. Pitta Prakriti person is prone to get digestive disorders. Similarly, Kapha Prakriti individual has got good long-term memory. So these are certain aspects of Tridosha with respect to constitution. Then comes nutrition. So Ayurveda uses the theory of Tridosha to understand the nutritional aspects as well. For instance, black gram is considered as guru, that is heavy, and hence it aggravates kapha. Similarly, shashtikashali, a kind of rice, it suppresses vata. Similarly, individuals with vata prakriti, they should consume more and more, or rather adequate quantities of milk that alleviates vata. So these are some examples to say that Ayurveda considers Tridosha in understanding the nutritional aspects as well. Then comes pathology. Ayurveda uses theory of Tridosha to understand and explain pathological features as well as pathological processes as well. For instance, Kamala, which is equal to or equivalent to jaundice. It results because Vayu takes Pitta from its actual site to other peripheral sites. Suppose this is Pitta, it is situated in its normal site, and Vayu takes this Pitta to all different peripheral sites, and that is where the manifestation occurs. So that is how Ayurveda has considered the Tridosha theory in describing pathology as well. Similarly, another example we can take Sthaulya. Obesity. Sthaulya results when there is aggravation of kapha, which leads to accumulation of excess of meda. So there is excess of meda that accumulates, and this is fundamentally because of an abnormal increase in kapha. The role of Tridosha is also very important in understanding the materia medica in Ayurveda, that is Dravya Guna. For example, Gugulu is a very commonly used plant material, resin, and it is effective in Vata and Kapha disorders. Katuki, another plant, is useful in Pitta disorders. And Haritaki, one of the constituents of Triphala, it acts on all three doshas, Vata, Pitta and Kapha, all the three. That's why it is called Tridosha Hara. Similarly, Tridosha is also important in diagnosis. Clinical manifestation also depends on Tridosha, and hence diagnosis also in turn depends on Tridosha. For example, there is itching. So itching cannot manifest without the involvement of Kapha. Similarly, pain cannot manifest without the involvement of Vata. Redness or inflammation cannot manifest without the involvement of Pitta. So next one is the role of Tridosha in therapeutics. Vamana, Virechana, and Vasti. They are the ideal treatment options for specific disorders that are related to Vata, Pitta and Kapha. For instance, Vasti is best for Vata disorders, Virechana is best for Pitta disorders, and Vamana, the therapeutic emesis, is best for Kapha disorders. Similarly, Taila, that is oil, Ghrita, ghee, and Madhu, honey. They are the ideal treatments for Vata, Pitta and Kapha disorders respectively. So this is how Ayurveda treats Tridosha as a very important template, and it uses this template for different aspects starting from biology to therapeutics. This is the unique feature of Ayurveda, and that is why Tridosha is to be considered as a theoretical framework based on which Ayurveda has evolved its different modalities of interventions and also preventions. There is one interesting verse in Sushruta Samhita where Sushruta describes the relationship between Tridosha, which are working inside the body, with certain forces that regulate the universe. So universal regulating mechanisms have been compared with the regulating factors that regulate different functions within the body. And this is very interesting because it is very scientific. Vata has been equated with atmosphere, that is Anila. Pitta has been equated with sun, and Kapha has been equated with moon. And Surya and Soma. And this relationship has been explained through the functional aspects of these different entities. For example, atmosphere, it offers movement, or it is characterized by movement. Sun or Surya is equated with energy, and Kapha or moon has been equated with stability. And again, on the other direction, these three are again related with three more entities within the body, that is Prana, Tej and Oj. This is a beautiful pattern of relationships that has been explained in Ayurveda. And this is very interesting because we now know that these are the three important factors that possibly determine the existence of life on earth. Atmosphere, without atmosphere there cannot be life, that is very obvious. Without sun there cannot be life again, which is again obvious. And it is because all the energy that all living organisms derive is basically from the sun. So sun happens to be the ultimate source of energy for all the living organisms on the earth. Moon is also very important because moon is said to be involved in stabilizing the axis of the earth by exerting the optimal amount of gravitational pull. That is how the earth has been able to maintain its axial tilt of about 23.3 degrees angle. And that is very important because if this axis was not stable, then possibly earth would not have been able to sustain the life. As I told in the initial part of this discussion, Tridosha is basically a theory. That is why we often call it a Siddhanta. And no structure or no substance in the body can be equated with any dosha. This is very important. And the theory of the dosha actually represents what we call homeostasis in the contemporary physiology. Nowadays, this term is often being replaced by the term homeodynamics because the homeostasis fundamentally means that a state of stability or stable state, especially with respect to the different parameters such as maybe blood pressure, body temperature, glucose levels in the blood, and so on. And this stable state cannot be achieved by keeping everything stable. There are always dynamic processes involved in regulating all these different parameters. And that is why the current terminology which is often being utilized by the physiologists to explain the homeostasis is homeodynamics. And precisely the Tridosha theory represents the homeodynamic principles in the body when it comes to the biology. So we will be in next few minutes focusing on the role of Tridosha on biological functioning or regulating aspects. I often draw this figure to explain Tridosha. So these three arrows, they represent three equal and opposite forces that are acting upon this central point, keeping it stable. So the stability of this point will be altered whenever one of them gets bigger and stronger, so that the point will start moving to different directions. But as long as all the three forces are equal and opposite, then the point is likely to stay at the particular point with certain stability. So now we shall take this point as blood pressure, arterial blood pressure. So arterial blood pressure in the body is maintained at maybe 120 by 80 millimeters of mercury. This is the normal blood pressure, and this is maintained because of several opposing mechanisms that are acting, that are active. For example, there is sympathetic nervous system, which tends to increase the blood pressure. A sympathetic nervous system increases blood pressure by increasing the heart rate, by increasing the peripheral resistance, by increasing the cardiac output, and so on. So this is one important factor that regulates blood pressure. Similarly, there is parasympathetic nervous system, which decreases blood pressure, and it decreases blood pressure by decreasing heart rate, decreasing the cardiac output, and so on. Similarly, there are some other forces like hormones. For instance, the atrial natriuretic polypeptide, or renin angiotensin system, which ultimately produces angiotensin 2, which acts on the adrenal cortex and also acts on blood vessels. So renin angiotensin system increases blood pressure, whereas atrial natriuretic polypeptide decreases the blood pressure. So we can, by this example, understand that there is no one single factor that is responsible for the maintenance of blood pressure. There are always multiple factors, and all these factors, they act in opposite directions. They do not act in same direction, and that is how the homeostasis of blood pressure, or blood pressure homeostasis, is maintained in the body. And this is exactly how the Tridosha theory has to be understood, because Vata, Pitta and Kapha, they share some opposite qualities. For example, Pitta is Ushna, whereas Vata is Shita. Pitta is Tikshna, whereas Kapha is Manda, and so on. So these attributes of different doshas, they are often opposite and sometimes they are also equal. So that is how the three doshas, they help in the maintenance of homeostasis. So functions of Tridoshas can be taken as the templates to understand the different entities that are represented by Tridoshas at different levels of organization. For example, the Vata. The fundamental functions of Vata are initiation, motivation, control, division, sensation, movement, and so on. So these are the fundamental functions of Vata. Similarly, for Pitta, there are some fundamental functions that have been ascribed. For example, the production of heat is a fundamental function of Pitta. All energetics, all transformations, metabolism, digestion, food intake in terms of hunger. So these are certain specific functions that have been ascribed to Pitta. Similarly, there are some other functions, specific functions ascribed to Kapha. For instance, strength, resistance, protection, immunity, growth, and structural integrity. So these are certain specific functions that have been ascribed to Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So if we understand these functions, we will be able to extrapolate these functions to different functional units of human body, such as maybe a cell, a tissue, an organ system, or the organism. So these are the different levels of organizations that are there in a living organism. The functions of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha can be extrapolated by understanding these functions. Let us take an example of a single cell. We will understand that the control of most of the functions of a cell lies with the nucleus, because it contains the DNA, and based on the functioning of DNA, the cell synthesizes some specific proteins, or it controls several other activities of a given cell. Similarly, the transformation or metabolism within the cell is controlled by several enzymes, which may be either present in cytoplasm or maybe in mitochondria or maybe in lysosomes and so on. So these enzymes, they perform the functions such as digestion and metabolism within the cell. So control, transformation and metabolism, and finally the protection or structural integrity or stability. So these aspects of a cell are because of certain structures such as plasma membrane or endoplasmic reticulum, or maybe Golgi apparatus, and so on, because they yes, there is also growth or anabolic activities. So the endoplasmic reticulum, it synthesizes, or it contains the ribosomes, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and is related with the protein synthesis, whereas the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is concerned with lipid synthesis. So synthetic functions or synthesis functions are related with endoplasmic reticulum. Plasma membrane offers the protection and also determines the shape of the cell or size of the cell. Golgi apparatus helps in the further processing of proteins and so on. So this is how you can understand the Tridoshas at a single cellular level. Let us take up now a single system, for example, or a specific type of cell, maybe neuron or nervous system, right? So here we shall try to understand the role of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. So fundamentally the nervous system functions because of the action potentials. So action potentials happen to be one of the important features of all the neurons, and the characteristic features of action potentials or impulses are very, very similar to Vata, which is concerned with movements and sensations. Similarly, there are neurotransmitters which require several enzyme systems for their synthesis and also for metabolism. So these can easily represent the functions of Pitta. Similarly, there are some protective mechanisms such as the membranes or the, for example, neural lemma or maybe myelin sheath. So these are some substances or structures that can represent the Kapha very easily. So now let us take up an individual organism. So we will try to look at the role of Tridoshas at an individual. So now in the recent years there has been one very interesting development where three important systems have been recognized as three most important coordinating systems in the body. And they operate with coordination with each other, and they regulate most of the functions in the human body. And therefore a new branch of physiology is emerging and developing, and this is called neuroimmunoendocrinology. So the name itself suggests that three systems, nervous system, immune system and endocrine system, they possibly play very important roles in regulating and coordinating most of the functions in the human body. And by going through the functions again, Vata can represent nervous system, Kapha can represent immune system, and Pitta can represent endocrine system. Hence, Once again, we can conclude that any single substance or structure cannot represent Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Vata, Pitta, Kapha actually are theoretical entities, and Tridosha theory is basically a theoretical framework. And again, Vata, Pitta and Kapha, they can represent different entities at different levels of organization. And if we develop this kind of interpretation and understanding of Tridosha, possibly it will be helpful for us to draw further insights and conduct research which can ultimately contribute to the science of biology. With this, I conclude this lecture. Thank you.